He used to be the most dreaded individual in the clench your fists around a tall figure like Hearns. Thomas, wrecking balls, characterized a time in boxing when few ventured to enter, but now, at age 66, a man who used to rule the sport with a life is lived with pride, power, and purpose. Characterized by suffering, financial difficulties, and silent seclusion that was previously praised as Detroit's A world with 5 divisions and a crown jewel now, champion Hearns must deal with a tragedy. Reality is so different from the splendor that when he was surrounded. This is the tragic tale of what transpires when the throng stops when the lights go out. Applauding and the punches cease to land. This is Thomas Hearns' actual life. Prior to becoming the hitman today, the blood, the belts, and the Thomas, unforgettable battles in the ring. Hearns was a timid, lanky child growing up. Growing up in Detroit's impoverished neighborhoods, he was born on October 18, 1958, and the youngest of 9 kids living together. Life as a parent wasn't always easy. Mother was violent and had several jobs. Stuff you didn't watch on something that bled was the television. Outside your door onto the streets as a Hearns, a teenager, entered the famous boxing gym Crone Gym in the basement club that would become the epicenter of Detroit combatants there under the Emanuel Stewart. Hearns's reputation instantly recognized himself as Stewart. Noticed a change in the skinny child with raw skin and extraordinarily long arms. Power. He will win a championship. Reporters once heard Stewart say, "Not just a champion, a legend started to emerge." His reputation rapidly as a novice, he accumulated more than 150 victories and received National Amateur Athletic Union 1977 championship, but it was in the professional ring he actually arrived at living with a whip-like frame, and the Hearns created a cobra speed fashion that was both exquisite and he could dance like Ali, which is terrible, but like Tyson. His jab held opponents at bay. By 1980, his right hand had put an end to them. He had 26 knockouts at 28-0. He challenged Pino Cuevas in the same year. Regarding the WBA welterweight title, a boxer with 4 years of unbeaten records, he was destroyed by Hearns in 2 rounds. The triumph was more than just a title win. It was a declaration that a new force had come. The Motor City Cobra then turned into a well-known figure. He wasn't merely fighting, he was fighting for Detroit, for himself. A city rife with crime and poverty had Hearns and a hero embrace at last. It was driving and wearing fur coats, Cadillacs, and going into battle with he could freeze blood with his sight. Represented his hometown's roughness, but this was just the start of the world. Hadn't witnessed Thomas Hearns' best, but battles were on the horizon, and they would. Thomas Hearns' ascent will always be remembered. Wasn't merely remarkable, it was historic. Following his victory in the welterweight 1980, he was instantly captivated by the whirlpool of a golden age. The period of the Sugar Ray Leonard and Four Kings Marvin Hagler and Roberto Duran. Hearns helped establish the definition of boxing at heart, and skill strength clashed into the first of those fabled rings matches against Sugar Ray in 1981. Leonard's battle intensifies as the confrontation. Hearns entered without losing to Leonard. The national darling lost everything. The early rounds were dominated by Hearns with his reach and jab, but later Leonard rushed back in the 14th round. The referee broke up the altercation with stumbling into the ropes. Hears was a hard pill and his first loss. Many thought he was only a few seconds away on the scorecards from winning, but instead of retreating, Hearns got back in. He confronted Roberto Duran in 1984 and did what he punched out the thing that no one had ever done. Renowned Panamanian in 2 rounds. It was the most catastrophic loss of as Duran's career progressed. The hurt of Leonard's passing and regained his intimidating aura, followed by the conflict with the amazing Marvin Hagler in 1985. The build-up to the actual fight was electric. Legendary, the first round is frequently referred to as the best boxing round history, a bloody, crazed fight that had fans standing up right away. His right hand was broken in the opening exchanges, but blood continued to stream out from the head of Haggler, but in the third Haggler caught him red in the face and stopped him. It was brave and terrible. It was remarkable, but in spite of these Hearns continued to amass titles despite his setbacks. 1 titles and 5 distinct, being the first male in weight classes welterweight to do so in history. He bucked the rising odds as a cruiserweight into every division with authority that carried by the late. Regardless of the weight, Hearns was a multimillionaire in the 1980s. Legend in life and among the most men in the sport who are valued for their rights hand, had turned into an adversary of mythology. Detroit's supporters loved him and feared him, worshipped him, but the more ascending the more difficult the descent, especially for Thomas learns that greatness would eventually come at a cost. Start to emerge in ways that no one could thought boxing was a cruel game. Not only in the ring but also in the way that requests made by a man long after the last Thomas Hearns bell at the price of glory arrived not in a single, shattering strike but rather in they accumulated in the hundreds over wars that lasted for decades and left deeper scars. Hearns never shied away from showing themselves. He went toe-to-toe with someone after a disagreement, absorbed retribution from stories that would have put a stop to other professions, and persevered into his 40s. But those decisions came at a high cost over time. Signs started to appear in his speech. Once swift and self-assured turned sluggish and slurred, and his hands got worse. Shuddered a little while signing. Long-time enthusiasts murmured about autographs. CT regarding a hero's trauma gradually disappearing before their very eyes. But Hearns persisted in battling despite having nothing left to demonstrate. That he continued to ascend back into the ring, occasionally out of pride for financial gain at times. As fighting was, he had only ever seen the deterioration. In total, he underwent several procedures. There were rumors that he required help walking. Friends who are concerned family members made an effort to step in. However, Hearns remained loyal to his fighting spirit. Advancing what the world didn't, was aware that the narrative was accompanied by a man who wakes up every day in anguish with persistent headaches and painful joints and a body that stopped following his. Speaks for a man who has exchanged decades of health for the crowd's noise, and the excitement of winning is worse than his career's financial benefits started to eliminate wasteful spending and bad investments. Generously giving hangers and family handouts on Hearns, tens of millions had been made, but a large portion of it was disappeared by the 2000s, so like there were too many winners before him. Hearns, Thomas, started to sense the slow decline. The money dried up, and the celebrity disappeared. The Motor City was destroyed by the body. Fear had been ingrained in the souls of men, but now in the peaceful obscurity of retirement, he encountered a distinct type of the opponent. Timed the decline in popularity. For Thomas Hearns, it was more than just physical. News broke in 2010 that it was financial. The former world champion submitted an application for bankruptcy. For his viewers' fondness, it was startling for Hearns to earn millions. It was embarrassing for him at the time. Warrior untouchable who has ruled over now, there were no more 5 divisions. $450,000 in debt, which includes an astounding $250,000 due in court documents to the IRS. Hearns mentioned past due taxes and medical bills, with further unpaid costs as the cause of his financial breakdown. But his loved ones were aware that the truth flowed deeper. Hearns had consistently been giving, at the detriment of helping friends and family members, including distant acquaintances. In his heyday, he never gave freely, turned others away, but not many came back. Favor when he required assistance to settle his debts. Hearns had to make a difficult choice. Sold some of his most valuable items at auction. Belongings, such as championship belts, gloves, robes, and sentimental items for an individual who had sacrificed his life for having to sell those icons of boxing. His triumph was crushing, destroying his legacy one piece at a time. The story was reported by media sites such as King's Wildfire to collapse one, the once feared hitman. was the headline, was now being dissected by journalists. Seeking controversy, he turned into another figure in a sport that is infamous for destroying its stars and throwing away. Hearns showed up at fan conventions. His hands are slower for paid signings. The same man who knocked once had tired eyes. Eliminated Pepino Cuevas in 2 rounds as of right moment. For many $100, behind a fold-out table every appearance. But despite this, he grinned and refrained from lashing out. Accuse others, saying, "It's merely sometimes you win in life, and other times you learn." But how remained the puzzle? Someone who produced tens of millions are left without a solution. Has no financial lack of a safety net in education and a culture of indeed. There were men who took while Hearns provided an all-too-familiar tale in boxing, and it is among the most heartbreaking aspects of the voyage of Thomas Hearns is not just that he lost money, but he donated a lot and received so little in exchange outside of the headlines and the dangers of financial ruin. Something much more devastating is the psychological and physical toll that decades faced Thomas Hearns in the ring. While fans recall the right hand's punishment, the thundering blow and the lengthy jab knockouts, they frequently forget everything the physical harm that punishment inflicts on a man. And in recent years, Hearns' thoughts have seldom made an appearance in public without help. He frequently leans and moves slowly, clinging to someone or using a cane, for his slurred speech lacks equilibrium. Delayed responses during interviews, he finds it difficult to construct complete statements without weariness. That insiders and friends have silently conjectured about neurological harm, including the earliest indications of chronic, the illness known as traumatic encephalopathy, CT, produced by recurrent damage to the skull, but he has never acknowledged in public a diagnosis. All of the symptoms are recalled. Problems with diminished motor function, and he is no longer the man due to cognitive slowdown who once grinned while making knockout predictions. These days, he occasionally forgets the names of former rivals or the dates of his. The damage from the largest conflicts isn't only years of wear and tear on the nervous system. On his shoulders, spine, and joints have left Hearns in excruciating anguish. Had several surgeries, one of which was close aid, but he disclosed that Hearns occasionally awakens and requires assistance to stand. Though they are less frequent, there are good days. And more emotionally distant, it's hearing even more difficult things. Has always been a proud man, but he leads a peaceful life now. Limited existence, far from the splendor, far away. He doesn't hear the crowds shout, talk a lot about his suffering, but he conceals it beneath his smile. Behind the stillness, behind his sunglasses, he continues to go to little boxing contests. Usually, I sit in the back silently. Fans occasionally come up for pictures, or he never turns down autographs, and he's still kind, respectful, and carrying the aura of a former ruler of the sport. But the difference between the previous and present is difficult to overlook, and what could the sport he gave pained him the most? Things to check on him there infrequently. Do major networks not run specials? Big evenings of honor to a legend silently disappearing into the distance, with just the suffering and the memories to preserve the presence of Thomas Hearns when he stepped the final time out of the ring. And he didn't stroll into the sunset in 2006. Entered a quiet place with no grand goodbye, no Hollywood, no HBO special. Just a calm retirement with a stylish tribute, and a man who was older than his time, but not its effects. In subsequent years, Hearns has mostly distanced himself from the public view. When combatants such as Sugar Ray Mike Tyson and Leonard remained in the prominence through appearances and endorsements, Hearns veered away from broadcasting arrangements. The more remote from the mainstream, the calls were no longer being rolled by the cameras, ceased to arrive, and the hitman turned into the ghost of the golden age was recalled, but seldom seen. However, he occasionally collaborates with young combatants in Detroit, lending a hand at when he can. Gyms offer guidance, but it's not the line of work he had anticipated for retirement. Many thought he had turned into Emmanuel's legendary trainer follows Stewart's path. But with financial strain, his deteriorating health made it challenging. To dedicate everything he had to offer using his body was no longer able to sustain him. Currently resides modestly in Michigan, near there everything began. Far away from the million-dollar purses and the spotlight in Vegas, he spends the majority of his days alone. No vehicles, no entourages, just a dude attempting to spend the remainder of his life. There are reports that he still battles with debt. He has relied on the assistance of acquaintances or even former opponents to survive. There is no verified quantity, but rumors of continuous financial. He has been plagued by instability for years. Being broke is not as bad as being ignored. Thomas Hearns sacrificed everything to boxing: his legacy, his money, and his body. However, he hardly ever receives the recognition he merits. No rich endorsements, analytical position with no story of recovery, just sporadic references in highlight reels and what transpired with the stories. But he endures, he continues to sign gloves, shakes hands while continuing to say support for young combatants who I hardly know his voice anymore. Due to the fact that even after everything is gone, the Thomas Hearns, speed, the money, the crowds, remains silently standing in the shadows. However, he remains upright despite Thomas Hearns spends his latter years in relative insignificance. His legacy continues to reverberate across the boxing community. He possibly not popular on social media or leading events with pay-per-view, but for those familiar with the sport, Hearns continues to among the most thrilling,